recording to the cloud, Lauren. So we may have more people coming on in this hour, but I'm so excited for the three of you to introduce yourselves and what the initiative is that you would like to bring to our attendees, which are predominantly certified midwives and certified nurse midwives in the US. So Lauren, I'm going to let you start and tell me when to advance the slides.
Sure, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Ginger, for allowing us to come together tonight and discuss this. So, just to give you a little bit of background, I'm an OBGYN generalist and was in practice for over 35 years and was the type of person who always questioned, why do we do it this way? This doesn't make sense. Why? There must be a better way. I felt like I would feel guilty when patients were waiting to see me for 35 minutes, 45 minutes. And then, I had a very quick visit with them. I just always thought it was kind of backward and wasn't very respectful of the pregnant person's time to wait for me and then not have very much time to spend with me. I was always behind. And I challenged and questioned a lot of things of like, why do we have to put that patient on the monitor if she's on labor and delivery for a labor check, but we don't do it in the office? And I just questioned. Ultimately, I was hired with my health system as the medical director of high value care and innovation. And as my chair said, I'm going to actually pay you to be disruptive and challenge how we do things and try to come up with new ways of providing care. I've been involved with group prenatal care. We had a freestanding birth center at our hospital, which was run by our midwives, and I was the medical supervisor for that because in South Carolina, you had to have a physician see the patient for a visit twice during the pregnancy. Unfortunately, we had to close that for financial reasons, which is also very sad because it wasn't, even though it's a less expensive way to provide care, it wasn't being financially solvent. So we had to close that. So I believe in, offering women choices, and I don't think that one size fits all is the way we should go. So then I was involved with the My Path panel, and that was a group out of the University of Michigan and ACOG. And what we did was to set about to talk about reinventing prenatal care and modernizing it. So next slide. So I wanted to just kind of give an overview and also hear from the people who are here tonight and just talk about all the different kind of patient-centered options, give a brief overview of the My Path recommendations. And Ginger did send out an article that was an overview of that, of those new recommendations, which of course will take quite some time for people to adopt. And then as part of a new way of providing prenatal care now with all the digital tools that are available to us and COVID sort of advancing and accelerating that, give a deeper dive into the use of digital healthcare tools. Next slide. So when you think about all the ways to provide prenatal care, and when a woman comes in and she wants to know how will I be cared for during my pregnancy, traditionally it was in person. So it was the 12 to 14 visits in person, deliver in a hospital. But now in 2022, it can be in person, it can be done via telehealth. Most places now have really jumped on board with offering group prenatal care. It can be a hybrid. It can be some visits in person. It can be some visits with telehealth. It can be some of the care being performed with digital health. And the difference between the telehealth and digital health is digital health would involve education being provided with an app and then allowing the patient to do remote blood pressure and weight monitoring. And that does not have to be during a telehealth visit. It could be an asynchronous tool. You can do group care as a hybrid. You know, we found out during COVID that we were able to do a lot of meetings virtually like this one. And I don't know about you, but I am very appreciative of not having to drive into the office, park for a meeting when I can now turn on my computer and meet with my colleagues. Saves me a good bit of time. So I appreciate the opportunity to not have to drive in person for every meeting. You can choose, or you should be able to choose between whether or not you want to have a physician or a midwife participate in your care. And then I really believe you should also have a choice about where you want to have your birth occur, whether that be the hospital, a birth center. I think home birth is still something I haven't quite come to grips with, but that'll be interesting to hear your views on that as well. Next slide. So just to give you a background on the origins of prenatal care. So when you think about it, modern prenatal care was born in the early 1900s. And as we were just discussing, it's not really evidence-based. You know, we just thought, well, we need to see people on a schedule. And, you know, one of the main things we want to find is preeclampsia. We want to be able to educate women, people who are pregnant. We want to be able to answer questions. We want to find out what their weight trend is. And we want to check their blood pressure because we know that preeclampsia is something that needs to be done. But, you know, we used to have to bring somebody in to do that because we had to do the blood pressure in person. But when you think about it, a lot of what we do really doesn't require an in-person visit for every single visit. Next slide. And then this is sort of old, but is it safe to do fewer visits? So we came up with this schedule of whoever invented the schedule of every month for a while, and then every 2 weeks for a while, and then every week for a while. And you say like, oh, that sounds like a good schedule, but was it evidence-based? No, not really. So when you look at a systematic review of 7 RCTs, they looked at a reduced prenatal care model versus the standard model. And they looked at a lot of women, low risk women in a variety of settings. Next slide. And they really found that there was no difference in maternal or perinatal morbidity or mortality, especially when there were at least 5 visits. So what we know is that you really don't need those 12 to 14 visits to have a successful outcome. Next slide. But we also found that women in all settings were generally less satisfied. So there were these big gaps of time. This is a new event for a lot of people. They have questions, they want some reassurance, and that's totally understandable. And so you, even though it was just as healthy to reduce the visits, the satisfaction was not great. Next slide. So what could be done to alleviate that? So again, the MyPath study is looking at ways to reduce the number of in-person visits, but to tailor the care for individuals. So now we know that technology is available. And I thought this was a really good quote. When Allison was pregnant with her first child, her clinic scheduled frequent appointments to make sure everything was proceeding normally. I was taking time off work and it wasn't doing a lot for me. I kind of felt like I was almost doing it more for the clinic's benefit than for myself. And so I think there is a group of people out there who feel quite secure with learning to manage their own care and do wonder why I'm coming in a distance, driving, parking, missing work, getting a babysitter just for a quick appointment when a lot of what I'm getting done could be done in the comfort of my own home with either a home blood pressure monitoring or with education that is available. Next slide. So I want to play this video. So I didn't say that throughout my career, I did all that I did. And then I did meet this company, Babyscripts, which does provide digital maternity care, began to work with them unofficially. And then I did leave my practice and I'm now the medical director for that company. Also work with substance use disorder and do some other things on the side. So my role is now in that capacity, but let's just play this video. Let's see, we should have some sound. Ginger, you're going to try to back it up, or you're my tech guru?
Where's the baby? Baby. So I've been married almost 5 years to my husband. We married 5 years in June. And we're expecting our second baby, another boy. And we've just been really enjoying our family life. It's been going well. I'm a stay-at-home mom and my husband works full-time. Right now, I'm about 22 weeks. And this one is a little different because I've had more morning sickness and fatigue. And then now that we have William, our 17-month-old, it's just a little more busier.
The first few months of pregnancy, we see the patient once a month. Starting at 28 weeks, we see them every 2 weeks. And then the last month, we see them once a week. Well, we always check their weight, we check their blood pressure, and then we just obviously talk with the patient, see if there's any problems that they're having. Once they get to a certain stage, we measure their belly, just make sure they're growing appropriately. We listen to the heartbeat.
The things that hindered me from going to the doctor were knowing that, okay, do I bring the toddler or not this time? And sometimes you just can't find a babysitter. Your family's busy, or you don't want to spend a lot of money on a babysitter, or the babysitter is not available. And we are also kind of transitioning into one car right now. I decided to use Babyscripts after a friend who has the same doctor as I do told me about it. She was having her third baby at the time, and she said I get to take my blood pressure at home. I don't have to go and get checked. I don't have to cart the toddler in the car, find a babysitter, or just make the time and gas mileage to go over there. But it also didn't take away all the doctor's appointments. And I also felt safe knowing that when the machine's taking my blood pressure and I use the app, the information goes right to the doctor. And they can check my charts and say, oh, her blood pressure is high or low, or her weight is not where it should be, and they can keep in contact with me.
Particularly with blood pressure, that's one of the most important things that we look at. And it's important for us to identify someone who's starting to have abnormal blood pressures, abnormally high blood pressures, and also weight gain. If they're gaining too much weight, it can help us identify a patient that may be starting to develop a problem that we need to address. We still have to see the patient in the office. I mean, nothing will ever replace actual physical visits, and I don't think it should. But we're able to space the visits out further because we have the information that they're getting to us weekly through the app. I think it's a natural progression of technology in medicine. We're just seeing the very beginnings of this kind of thing. And it's good that we're kind of getting our feet wet, because it's definitely going to be more and more. And I think it's, in the long run, I think it's going to actually help us take better care of patients. And that's the end goal.
You know, every appointment does take time away from being at home, from your family and your family's routine. And you know, life gets busier in some seasons. And, you know, if my baby's sick or there's something I need to do at home that's, you know, pressing, or if I want to make sure my family dinner is ready before my husband gets home, it's just really nice having that option.
Great, thank you.
This revolutionary new device can remove up to 10 times more earwax than a traditional cotton.
Well, that's interesting. So I think a lot of times as people who are the care providers, we don't stop to think how annoying it might be for a patient to have to come into the office for something so simple that can be taken care of over the phone, even when you bring a patient back in to discuss results and say, you know, everything looks good. And it's like, you know, why did I really have to do that? Of course, our system is set up in a way that that's really how we've been told to do it. That's how we're reimbursed. Hopefully that will change. Next slide. So I got drawn into doing this, and this was an exciting thing to do because I'd been talking about doing this kind of transition of care for many, many years. And the University of Michigan collaborated with ACOG to come up with reinvention of maternity care, restructuring, care that was more individualized, put patients into categories where you would consider medical needs. So there are people with chronic conditions and pregnancy complications who may need more intense care. Social needs need to be considered. So patients who have a higher number of social needs and structural determinants of health need some wraparound services. And then there's a large group of women who are healthy, have good social support, don't have any structural determinants of health, and perhaps that group just doesn't need the intense monitoring that we're accustomed to giving with the 12 to 14 visits. Next slide. So really, this is sort of the highlights of the My Path recommendations. In-person visits can be streamlined to 4 visits. That would be the first visit, the 28-week visit, 36-week visit, and 39-week visit. This is a real change from what we typically do. In order to make this happen, though, you do have to have access to telehealth. You have to have home blood pressure monitors. You need to be able to monitor weight. So this is something that would need to be available in order to make this plan work. Of course, this group of people, young people who are experiencing pregnancy are, you know, that's a demographic that's already quite used to telehealth. They're used to doing things online. They're used to making appointments online. So it's a really good group to target. We also know that a lot of chronic care conditions are being handled this way. So people who have high blood pressure, diabetes are quite used to taking their glucose measurements at home. They're quite used to taking blood pressure measurements at home. So why not our group of patients as well? You can't forget that we need the support for social and structural determinants. So we need to involve the community and the health system in providing that and consider the patient needs. Not every patient will want to do it this way. So again, offer the patient the option of how they'd like to have their prenatal care. And then also, as we know, each health system is going to implement this differently and on a different schedule. Some parts of the country are still a little bit slow to adopt new methods of care, and other parts of the country are innovators. Next slide. So what I wanted to just sort of ask the audience, and it's a small group, so we can certainly chat more. But I'm sure during COVID, most people did use telehealth instead of in-person visits, at least for some visits. So I wanted to hear some talk about that. I know that we used remote blood pressure monitoring. More and more places are using pregnancy apps instead of handing out all of the different pamphlets that oftentimes get tossed into the back seat of the car. I imagine a lot of places are using group prenatal visits. And then one question on our MyPath we spoke a lot about is how many people would be comfortable using home fetal heart rate detection, and also about monitoring growth of the baby. So, we were talking earlier about if you can feel your baby move, we really don't have any evidence that you need to do a dop tone, because if any of you have been pregnant, you know that you feel fetal movement, and that's pretty much a good sign. and why we have to do a dop tone to confirm a heartbeat, never really made sense to me, but I know we did it. I also was a bit skeptical about fundal height measurement. I mean, I know it gives kind of a good sense of growth, but I didn't think it was too highly accurate. I felt like I could really tell by just feeling, doing a Leopold's maneuver. So I also want to just bring in the two midwives that I invited, because they have been on the forefront of using digital health, and I wanted to get some feedback from them on how their patients are enjoying it or not enjoying it, and how useful they find a different way of providing prenatal care. So I think at this point, I'll turn it over to you guys and let you introduce yourselves and your roles in your health system.
Okay, well, I'll go. So my name is Suki Kraus. I am actually the director of the midwifery education program at Bay State Medical Center, but for about 9 months, I was also the division chief for midwifery at that same medical center, and it was during the pandemic. And so we're already in the project of looking at Babyscripts for the use within the department. And we were looking at it for the midwifery group, and we were looking at it for the faculty physician group. So we, I want to be clear, I'm not a promoter per se of Babyscripts, but we are a fairly significant consumer at this point. And it's gone from a tool that we used to weather the pandemic and to support care during the pandemic, to recognizing that there are a lot of patients out there that we are caring for who are benefiting from not having to come to the office so much, including people that we are worried about, people who have prior preeclampsia, people who have some chronic hypertension, people that we really want and we consider higher risk. And it's been a tremendous benefit. I have really mixed feelings about decreasing the frequency of visits too much, but I really don't think they have to be all in the office. I mean, when I see someone in the office, I talk to them for about 18 minutes and I do physical stuff for less than 2, I'm really excited that I can work with someone at their new OB visit, and I've done the physical, and it's like, okay, so we can see you in 4 weeks or 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks. We can sign you up for this option. We can do all your visits in person. We can do every other by the phone. We can, and really let people design what will work for them. And that's been great. It's also increased our postpartum show rate by, show rate. We have a lot of people who have trouble making a postpartum visit. Doing it on the phone and having that Babyscripts blood pressure has doubled the number of people we see for postpartum visits. So it's worked for our practice, our population, it's worked wonders. And it's really transforming from, okay, we got it through the pandemic, and now it's like, oh, okay, so what are we going to do with this tool now that we have it? I will answer that question about fetal non-stress tests remotely. I think that would be a great idea, as long as it didn't become something that we then increase the number of unindicated non-stress tests. Because just because we can do it doesn't mean we should. It is not a benign intervention. So on the one hand, it would be very much easier for some of our patients, but I am from that age. I remember home uterine monitoring, and I know some of the other people in this phone call remember home uterine monitoring too. We thought it was all the best thing in the world, and lo and behold, randomized controlled trial, it had nothing to do with monitoring. It was the nurse talking to them that made the difference.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
a great point.
I worry, I am excited, but also cautiously optimistic that we could, I mean, that's really within our control. But the other thing that does happen when you give someone a tool, sometimes they overuse that tool. So anyway, so that's just, I'm happy to talk and answer anybody's questions about our experience. But in a nutshell, that's why I agreed to come and talk about it. We've been working very closely with Babyscripts for a couple of years now.
Great. Can you expand on one thing that I've been really excited about is the monitoring postpartum for women with a hypertensive disorder of pregnancy. So we know that a lot of the bad things that happen to women happen postpartum. And, traditionally, again, I've been around a very long time. It's like, oh, you had your baby, we'll see you in 6 weeks. And we know that's not appropriate. We know that postpartum depression can happen. We know that normal people can get preeclamptic. We know that people with a hypertensive disorder of pregnancy can escalate. And so the recommendations are to follow people with a hypertensive disorder of pregnancy with blood pressure checks in the first 10 days after delivery. But that again seemed kind of nonsensical to me, to ask people to come back to the office when they've just had a baby for just a blood pressure check. So it's not just that they walk in for a blood pressure check, they have to drive in, they have to park, they have to arrange childcare or get somebody to drive them. They have to go to the front desk. You know that you don't just walk in and do the blood pressure. There's all those little steps. And that just didn't seem logical to me. Not to mention that our show rate for that was not great, understandably. And so we had found that the show rate and the ability to monitor patients has gone up with patient satisfaction. So Suki is working on that. Can you speak to that as well?
Yeah, that's actually gone very smoothly. We now have Babyscripts blood pressure cuffs on our obstetrical unit. And we have an order set now that all we have to do is order postpartum blood pressure monitoring, and nurses and administrative assistants set the whole thing up. And then we get a notification call for elevated blood pressures. And we just ask now our office nurse, rather than, okay, we're going to book this person to come in for a visit for a blood pressure check. We ask the office nurse to look at the blood pressures on whatever day. And the patient does not need to come in. And it has been very effective. Yes, every once in a while, the blood pressure at home doesn't match what happens in the hospital, but that's been a minority of people. And I feel really comfortable. What I really like about the postpartum is that they've been measured for the blood pressure cuff. They're given the appropriate blood pressure cuff. And so I feel more confident that the blood pressure is an accurate reflection of what's happening in the home setting. So it's been great. And it isn't just with this, we've launched for every obstetrical provider. Both midwife practices, the physician practices, all have access to this. So basically the entire unit of 4,000 births a year is now getting this if they have a hypertensive disorder. And I think it's been very beneficial.
I'm
And I
just
think
hoping,
people like
I'm
it.
hoping that that someday all women will be sent home with a blood pressure cuff. Because I think with as many people who develop it postpartum, I don't know why that group is also not part of it. Plus, I think that with, these are all, it's also a group of women who have the disorder of pregnancy, that they're going to have chronic hypertension more lifelong. And so to be able to empower them to take their own blood pressure and learn what the blood pressures mean and get into the habit, I think it's really an ideal time to launch wellness and good health, and then to continue it on in that year postpartum. But I do wish we could check everybody's blood pressure, not just that group of people. So maybe one day we'll have a recommendation to do that. Laurel, you also have had an experience using the technology, and can you tell us how your patients have liked it or not liked it or anything to
For
add?
sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Laurel, and I work at MedStar Washington Hospital Center in DC. And we have an independent midwifery practice there that gets back up from our laborist or, physician colleagues. And then we work with MFM on the outpatient side. We started using Babyscripts back in 2014 or 2015. And it was actually, it came to me because some of my colleagues in the system, because MedStar has like 9 hospitals, knew that some of my doctoral work is around the use of digital applications in the public health space in a variety of other kinds of settings. And so they were sort of curious about it. It was in sort of the innovation space, and I was very interested in it for a variety of reasons. And it was also free. The system was willing to sponsor our use for it. So it was very, for me, it was a pretty easy thing to want to investigate. When I shared it with the midwifery team, though, I like, most of them were like, you want to do what, Laurel? Like, this makes absolutely no sense for our patients. They're coming to see midwives. They want to see us. They want the time. They want the high touch, et cetera. And so we, and I said, yeah, it might be a big flop, but we'll figure that out pretty quickly. And maybe it'll be interesting. We found out pretty quickly that patients liked it. Some liked it more than others. We tended to see that people kind of leaned in more to the reduced visit option when they had, either job situations or distance to travel because they specifically wanted our practice or something like that. And or they had other kids, like the video sort of highlighted. The remote monitoring piece, we've done a lot with. We definitely feel like it has helped us identify hypertensive disorders of pregnancy sooner. We now use it in an integrated capacity so that the blood pressures go directly into the medical record. And that's relatively new. We did that in the last year. One of the things that we learned with that was that we had, years of patients using the Babyscripts blood pressure cuff, and I made the decision to try using durable medical equipment for a while, because then all I had to pay for was the app. It was more economical. I could expand it into all of our offices that poured up to me. And it seemed like I wanted to give it a try because that was covered by the cuff, then was covered by the insurance. And I thought it would be beneficial, financially. It was a big flop. Because patients who, used to take their blood pressures and, it would get into our system, they were taking their pressures, they were reporting them. If they knew and noticed it was high, they would call us, they would call our answering service, but they weren't taking the time to log their blood pressure into the app. And they had to log it in order for it to feed into the automated notification piece and stuff. So we've gone back recently to using blood pressure cuffs that sync with the app, because of course, there's a lot of advantages in terms of the safety and quality potential if people do that. I think there's other things we learned about using it that are equally important in my view. One of the things that I personally really appreciate about the app is that you can customize the content. And I think that's pretty critical. And, you know, starting way back, I mean, one of the first things we did, and I was like, geez, maybe I don't want to do this, because I looked at the content that was there and I didn't like any of it. It was all ACOG and March Dimes, and it was all about the doctors. And it was just, you know, the language was just not language that midwives use, and not language that I think promotes, you know, patient-centered care. So we did that. We took out stuff, we put in shared with women, we did a lot of customization. The thing we also then learned was that patients really were much more likely to lean in, because it felt much more like the app was a connection to our practice. We also noticed that, and I think this is maybe my favorite piece of using the digital technology, is that not everyone engages, but for patients who do, and who really like follow through and kind of follow the content in things, there was some degree of, you know, being able to let go of the, you know, the information dump, the things you always got to say and you say over and over. And then by the end of the day, if you've seen 5 people that are like 28 weeks, you want to like never do another 28 visit in your week visit in your life, because you don't want to say it again. Some elements of that went away, and we could then use more of that time to focus in on what was important to patients. And I think that was a pretty good step in terms of how to move the system more towards, you know, talking with women about, and pregnant people about what was important to them. It was a huge provider satisfier. Like, midwives loved it. We like getting out of that space of having to like say it really fast to make sure we get it out there, because then we covered it. And I think that was ultimately what kind of encouraged me to stick with it, figure out ways to pay for it, do the return on investment piece, like, and to keep it going, was because it spoke to patients and it spoke to the midwifery team. I think the last thing that I was going to mention too is that all of those pieces together, and again, not for everyone, not perfectly, but it did seem to put a little bit more, just a little bit more of the decision making, a little bit more engagement for, you know, our patients. You know, they owned their blood pressure, they owned their weight, they were doing those things themselves, they were watching it on their app, they were, you know, kind of reading and thinking about the information first and then coming back to us. And so I think we all really kind of appreciated that piece about it. We also use it and have seen it to be a positive force in the postpartum period. I think for us, it allows us to do 2 visits now, you know, which is not what is needed, but we've been able to incorporate a 2-week visit and then also the 6-week visit. And of course, I'd like to see that continue to expand. For postpartum blood pressure monitoring off the unit, I'll be honest, we don't do it that way, because we can get a synced cuff with a nurse that monitors those blood pressures through Optum Health, and I don't have to pay for it. It only goes to people with hypertensive disease, you know, some component of that, because we need to get that in order to be able to do it financially. So we're kind of building on the concept of remote monitoring and, you know, getting patients more engaged with that. But we've kind of taken a little bit of a different route.
Great, thanks. So I'm kind of curious from the other people who are listening in, if they're using remote monitoring in any way, or if they are reducing in-person visits and continuing to do that now that, you know, COVID, we hope, is on the decline.
Hi, this is Michelle Doyle. I'm a little tired, so excuse my look. I have my own practice in upstate New York, primarily attending birth at home. Because I have my own practice, I have the luxury of having hour-long appointments and that. And for even before COVID, had really worked to individualize, because she's having her 5th baby, father of the baby's the same, she's never had any problems. Does she really need to come for all of those visits? Probably not, but some of them really like to, even if it was an hour drive. My office is set up for kids to come at any time, so that made it easier. But individualizing with them. What I found with COVID that made things really nice is the idea that we could do Zoom or FaceTime. And lots of people have these, Dopplers floating around. So I just say to people at the beginning, like, ask around your family, see who's got a blood pressure cuff, see who's got a Doppler. You don't have to go buy these things, but if you ask around, they're probably there. And it's pretty amazing what you can do with a FaceTime or Zoom visit with a measuring tape and a Doppler. I frankly really don't like the idea of somebody reporting to me what their fetal heart tones are, because I haven't heard them. And, if you get a pregnant woman excited, it's pretty easy for her heart rate to be 110, 120. So, but you have a 3-year-old in the room helping press down on mommy's pubic bone. You can get a pretty amazing fundal height. And, I've had people listening and say, check your own pulse. I think it's a little bit farther, and then get a really crisp, clear 140 beats a minute. And it's been really fun. People have really enjoyed being involved in their care in that way. And so it's been a nice opportunity. And I've also been quite surprised at the people that just want to come in, because they really, really like, even if it's a car ride and an hour drive each way, the face-to-face time.
Yeah, I think that demonstrates one size does not fit all. So it's nice to be able to say, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to come in? Absolutely, you're welcome to come. Do you prefer to not come in? Absolutely, we can do it. So do you think you'll continue your telehealth portion of the practice post-COVID, because you found out people did want to do it that way?
Right. And I'm in upstate New York, so storms too. It's pretty nice if, there's a big ice storm, that we can still have a visit. And that's been, or, with COVID again, people that were quarantined because they'd been exposed. Well, we could still have a visit. We could still check all those things. And that's been really, really nice. So I'm sure that some of those things will be hanging on to.
I think so
And
too.
the postpartum visits, for my practice, there've always been intensive postpartum visits, 3 prenatal home visits, 3 home visits postpartum in the house, and then 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and 6 weeks. So way more than the standard, or what I was allowed to do when I was in hospital practice. But I'm also on the quality assurance review committee for the hospital I do have privileges at. And it's quite obvious that, in general, we need a lot more, this idea of having people be able to, be fitted for a blood pressure cuff on L&D or postpartum unit before they go home, and set them with that. That would be incredible. For my practice, it's no big deal, because I'm going to be there 3 times in the first week, and then they're going to come to the office. And but for the general population at the hospital, it's terrifying what we see come back in through the ER.
Yeah, so I think one thing that I like about it is being able to have a validated cuff that we know, isn't something you just go buy off the street, and make sure that it correlates with the wall blood pressure monitor, teach how to use it before they leave the hospital. So you've done the best you can, versus what I did 10 years ago, which is say, here are the signs of preeclampsia, call me if you have them, go to CVS and take your blood pressure, and then just keep my fingers crossed that it would all work out. I can't believe we did that. I mean, it was what we could do. And, but certainly I think this is better, and it'll take some work to work out kinks and bugs, but I feel like it's going to happen and become pretty much standard to do things at the home or the office. Any other insight into any other people who are on the call? Ginger, do you have any great insights?
I'm a patient educator, so I usually sit in silence for a while. Kim, are you out in Las Vegas?
No, I actually am in Austin, Texas area.
Okay, it looks like you want to share.
I do. I mean, I kind of had an interesting career. I'm a nurse midwife. Ginger was actually, with me with my program teaching me. So happy to know her. And I've done practice as a midwife for about 10 years. And in the past couple of years, I've transitioned over into being a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. And so I did that because I was seeing kind of like the mental health disparities that the ladies were encountering. And so I've definitely kept my foot kind of in the midwifery, range. And what I've been doing is kind of doing some freelance work. And I work with one of my former colleagues. She has her own birthing center / home birth practice. And, I just feel like if we are going to do that, because she accepts a lot of patients, she actually accepts Medicaid patients, which, you really don't see midwives do very often. And so I think that it would be a fantastic tool to, have some remote monitoring. I had never even heard of Babyscripts or anything like that. So, I think that would be fantastic for people that have those sorts of challenges, transportation issues, because we had one young lady that Ubers to her appointments. How much she needs her money, and I just kind of think about that population and how fantastic it could be. But I also think about the potential hesitancy of the providers because, there's such a huge negative stigma associated with Medicaid patients. I mean, we've all known the nurses and, just the attitudes change when you notice someone has Medicaid insurance. And in Texas, like 57% of the babies born here are born through women that receive Medicaid. And so I do think that it will be fantastic, but I would just caution, as you're implementing this to kind of like make sure that you're being really inclusive for people that, you may think are a little higher risk. So I really appreciated everybody kind of saying that, it works well for even the high risk moms. And I'd love to kind of see that data just to kind of support that would be something that would be wonderful to try to implement across the board.
We've been able to get this product covered actually by our state. One of the products, our Medicaid products in Massachusetts, but Massachusetts and Texas, I know, are different states. But we're actually seeing it get covered, and we actually started our process with grant funding for access, and because of we're using racial disparities as what we were trying to address with the product, and we got funding for 2 years of this. So we have not yet actually had to spend any money, and neither have any of our patients.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to kind of connect and just kind of like have a conversation about that, like what your process was and, how you got that started. I just love to hear about it.
So more payers are seeing the value in allowing people to have the home blood pressure monitors and are paying for it. Some states are still fee-for-service Medicaid, so there's sort of a disincentive for providers, however, call them providers, whatever you want to call them. But I've heard some people say, well, we don't want to reduce visits because we get paid for in-person visits. And, that just sort of hurts my heart to think that that would be your incentive is to, it would be more convenient for your patient who can't come in, but yet you want them to come in so that you can bill. And that just sort of hurts me to know that that's how we work. But, we have to advocate for change and get payers to realize that that's not the way it should be.
I'm really sorry. Was it Leslie? Was it you that was talking from Texas?
That's Kimberly.
Oh, it's Kimberly. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So Kimberly, I'm going to put in my email into the chat. And I actually had nothing to do with that, but connect you with the person who did.
That would
And
be
That's great, Suki. Thank you. Leslie, I think you're around. I see you're still with us. I don't know if you know Leslie Lauren. She's runs the Charleston birthplace in South Carolina.
So Leslie, I know your name, but I don't think I've ever met you personally.
Hi, same. I don't think we have met in person, but I know who you are.
I hope you know
and
good things and not bad things.
all good things, all good things. You work with a lot of good friends of mine, but
Good.
I have a birth center in Charleston, and I'm not on video because I forgot about this meeting and took a shower, so I was looking pretty hanky. So I'm just on my phone, but we've been using Babyscripts since before it was Babyscripts. And we use it kind of differently than most people have been talking about. As a birth center, we only have very low risk patients. So we use it more as a addition to the education piece, as well as we found that if you don't provide an app, the patient's going to go find an app, and there's a lot of really bad apps out there. I haven't customized mine as much as I would like to. It's been on my things to do list for quite a while. It just having the time to sit down and go through it and do it I just haven't had a chance. But I do like Babyscripts. I do think that they have worked really hard in recent times of getting away from the more physician focused information, and I do like the fact that the graphics are very professional, well done. I don't know if anybody has looked at the videos that are in there, but the two things I like the best about it would be the nutrition, where you can push choline and it tells you how much the pregnant woman needs and what foods have choline in it. And so it really is helpful for the patients for that. But the videos, especially for labor, where it shows how to do the hip squeezes and the different positioning. So it's a lot more than just the prenatal appointment side. There's a lot to it. So I look forward to working with it more. You've kind of inspired me to go back and customize it. We do some remote visits. Of course, they started with COVID, but we found that the patients that drive far, and we have 15% of our patients drive an hour and a half or longer to come to us. So we do offer them to have some of their visits via telehealth. So we do that.
Do you think you would find remote blood pressure monitoring to be helpful or not, since you have a very low risk population?
We talked about whether we would, we recently stopped doing urine dips last year. We talked about the blood pressure. What we tell our patients is to take their blood pressure, but we haven't been providing them with the actual cuff. For us, being a birth center, our budget is extremely tight. We barely make enough to cover salaries and bills. Midwives who work in birth centers get paid significantly less than midwives who work in hospitals because the reimbursement's so low for us. So it would be kind of a cost issue, mostly. So we have a low risk population, and then are we going to be able to justify the cost of using those cuffs?
I got rid of urine dips a few years ago in my practices, and that was a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know why they were very tied to doing urine dips. And it's like, but there's no evidence that you need to do a urine dip. congratulations on getting rid of some unnecessary care.
I would like to encourage maybe not just our patients who live far away, giving the option just for convenience for the patient, like what you said, but also to help with our scheduling. You know, it's been kind of tight lately. I mostly do admin, but I've had to go back to start seeing patients at least half a day, one day a week, just to make room for more prenatal appointments. So if some of the patients were not coming in as frequently or doing some of the telehealth visits, that might help relieve some of the stress and make it a little easier. You know, our visits are already 30 minutes, but 25 of those minutes are spent on education.
Correct. Good. Well, I think we're getting close to the hour. I appreciate everybody adding to the discussion. Thank you so much, Laurel and Suki. Thank you, Ginger, for allowing us to do this. I think it's being recorded, so I don't know how it gets sent out to people, but I know people, I listen to a lot of things after the fact just because I'm tied up at the time that webinars happen. So I hope that'll happen. Any other questions or comments or?
Lauren, just to let everyone know, we will have the recording put up on the Grow Midwives website and YouTube channel. I will also send you the link so you can disseminate it. But I think what might be helpful is if you could put in the chat board, if people are interested in reaching out to someone to talk about Babyscripts, do they call you? Do they call a regional director? How do they get linked up to learn more about the app?
Yeah, just email me.
You want to put oh, there it is. Okay, great. Perfect.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, we may actually have this list and reach out to you because, again, I want to be able to offer women choices and however they want to receive their care and meet them where they are. So,
well, I think dissemination of options is always the tricky part. You got to convince the providers, then you got to convince the public, and then you got to convince the payers, and it's a very long process, but I really appreciate all of you for sharing tonight. Babyscripts has gone much farther than when I remember its predecessor coming out. I haven't seen patients in quite a while, and I'm so impressed to hear Suki and Laurel what you've shared. I think that's fantastic. So I'm going to stop the recording and thank you all for being here.